things you need to learn a language and the stuff that you don't. So this is just going to be a few of the things that you should have if you are going to learn a language, and stuff that you might think you need but you don't actually. So before anything else, you've got mindset. So know that as a beginner, it is normal to make mistakes. It's normal to not know how to do things and to put everything down and take breaks. It's normal to do that. There's nothing wrong with you, basically. It is a process, and it's quite difficult to do, and you just need to remember to embrace the growth mindset. And the growth mindset is basically the idea that you can learn or achieve anything. It just takes a while, as long as you don't give up and you keep going. Practice makes progress rather than practice makes perfect, that kind of thing. So that's one thing you really need to make sure of before you go into learning a language, that you're embracing that growth mindset, and you know that you're not perfect, and it literally will just keep getting easier the more you do it. And then number one thing is the internet, if you know how to use it. So the internet is the most effective tool for learning a language, because it has all these things that you can use that are all going to help you learn. So you've got unlimited videos, unlimited websites, you've got Q&As where there's other people with problems probably similar to yours that have all been answered by experts, vlogs, YouTube, literally anything. There's so much stuff on the internet that can help you. You literally just have to search for your problem and the answer will basically come to you. Yes, you have to go through stuff and implement it, but that's kind of the fun of it. So there really isn't an excuse, because you can just basically type in your problem and find out how to fix it. And the only problem with that would be maybe you just don't like how you have to fix it, you got to learn a bunch of things, you got to do flashcards, that kind of thing. But yeah, the internet can basically fix any problem, and it's almost better than a teacher, because it has a bunch, it's got hundreds, thousands of teachers on it that you can find their websites and all that kind of stuff. You can find teachers on YouTube, experts to answer your questions. And just imagine, I like to think about, imagine you lived in the 1800s with no internet. How screwed would you be in learning? You'd have to read books, exclusively books. You should be reading books anyway, and get all your information from books, and you'd have to hire a teacher, and you'd actually probably have to go travel to that country, which is really inconvenient unless you're doing it for work or whatever. So yeah, it allows you to find all these things, and yeah, it is a weapon if you know how to use it properly. If you have a folder saved and you've got all your websites and everything you need, that's perfect. You'll absolutely smash the language. Number two is a notebook. So you must have something to write down notes with. You can't just be writing stuff down as you learn on random bits of paper, or typing it up and just deleting it for practice. That's not good enough. You need notes that you can actually read over, and it's good to write notes, because sometimes when you go back and read over, you'll find, well, not sometimes, all the time, you'll find plenty of mistakes that you've made. So you can go back and fix those, and that's really good for learning and growing the brain. So yeah, it's really not good enough to not have a notebook, because you're stalling your process. And a notebook, the things you can write down in it are topics you're having trouble with, any words you don't know. So if you're reading a book, you can make a list of all the words you don't know, go back and find them afterwards, and then read again with that list of the translations in front of you. You can just journal, you can just write stuff down, just freestyle, practicing things from memory, you might write down all the colors from memory, that kind of thing. And if you don't have a notebook, I believe you are operating at probably 20% max of your potential, because there's just no recording things down. There's if you're not writing anything down, you're literally just learning it, but you haven't actually seen how it doesn't matter how good you think you are, you haven't actually practiced writing it down. And if you're not any better at speaking than you are at writing. So if you're not writing, it's also going to mess up your speaking. And then third, content. Consuming content is probably the fastest way to learn, because if you think about it, that's actually how you learn your first language, English, presumably, to begin with. Obviously no one could teach you any of these grammar rules and stuff, because you didn't even know a language. You wouldn't understand what they're saying. So you learnt to begin with just by content, obviously children's books, nursery rhymes, all that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that taught you the basic words, and then from there you could move to more advanced reading as you got older. So content is just anything in the language you can absorb, so watch, read, that kind of thing. So types of content that are easily accessible are vlogs on YouTube, books, you can get ebooks online, books, you can buy them as well. You don't even need too many books, because you're not going to get anything anyway, so you can reread it and that kind of thing. Movies, TV, anything like that. Content is why you're learning the language, after all. Apart from just talking to people, you want to be able to read books, watch movies, that kind of thing. So you should just start now. Like, there's no reason people might think, oh, you're going to start reading, you're going to read your favourite book series after you've learnt the language. No, you should read it while you're learning the language, because it will actually help you get better. Even if you only understand literally 5% of what's in it, it's still helping you. And yeah, don't start with War and Peace I've just written. So basically, don't start with the hardest possible thing. If you started learning the language 5 minutes ago, you don't want to start with something really hard just because it will put you off. If you're like more advanced and you want to just have fun, I guess you can, but it will put you off and you'll be really annoyed that you can't read it. So it's better to start with something easier, like you want to start with children's books, that kind of thing. I've got a bit about it on the next slide. So, content I've used. Books are probably, it's debatable, but I reckon books are number one, or at least tied with number one for what's on the next slide. So they're great for reading for pleasure and learning tons of new words. And the good thing is you can actually, it's not like a video where you might go, oh, I'm going to put it on half speed, and it's just really annoying because they're talking too fast. Even if they're talking at normal speed, you're a beginner, so you need it really slow. With reading, you just go at your own speed, and you can stop whenever you want, start whenever you want, write down words, and you can also, it's like you can just reread sentences when you need to, like you're in complete control of the input. So, when there's words you don't understand, you can see how they fit together. Like if it's part of a compound verb, for example, you don't need to know what it is. Just part of something, and you don't understand part of it, you can maybe even guess what it is because you can see what's next to it. Just interesting stuff like that. So the books you want to start with are generally books for either children, so like nursery rhymes. It might seem a bit silly, but those are the best thing to start with. And written for learners as well. So I've got a picture of Ollie Richards' books I've read, one in Russian, which I'm currently reading, and one in Italian, which are fantastic. And especially, like in this case, the author, Ollie Richards, is an expert. So having some kind of book that's actually written for learners, it's designed for you to read, and different stages of learning. Obviously, you can see the Italian one is intermediate there, and the Russian one is for beginners, because I'm better at Italian and it's easier. And then once you get more advanced, reading translations of books you already like is also really good. The reason that's really good is because, for example, if you don't understand a word in a book, in a translation of a series you like or a book you like, you might actually not even need to look it up. Like, for example, in Harry Potter, when there's a word that I don't understand, because I've never seen it before in Italian, I might not even need to Google it. It's like, oh yeah, that word means this, because I've read the book in English and I just remember what would be there. You'd be surprised how much you actually just remember a word. Like when I know, like the first chapter of a book has some weird made-up word for Harry Potter, I'm like, okay, this means that, because I just remember it. Like, it'll just come to you. So that's really useful. And also, it's enjoyable because you're reading it, something you like, and because you already know what happens, it's a little bit easier. Like, you just kind of follow the plot, whereas if you've never read it before, it might be more difficult. So that's a picture of the Harry Potter series in Italian there. Only the box set, not that one or the ones on the side, they're English. But you can see these ones are all Italian, so Philosopher's Stone all the way to Deathly Hallows. And then you've got, eventually, you want to read books written for native speakers. That's the highest level. So as you can see here, you've got Els Morantes L'Isla di Arturo, which is a book actually written for Italians. Obviously, in whatever language you're going, but if you find books that are written for your languages, like the native speakers, that's the most advanced level, because obviously there's no shortcutting. It's not made easier. It's not like a translation of something, so like weird phrasing. It's literally for those people. So that will get you the closest to them as possible. Other content, vlogs and YouTube videos are also really good for just listening and talking. Even, again, if you don't understand all of what they're saying, it's good for just like familiarization, like you're learning the sounds, all that kind of things. And it's also good for learning slang, because obviously books are going to have different characters. They might talk in different ways because they're, different ages and stuff. But if you're just watching YouTube vlogs and YouTube videos, people are just talking to each other naturally. There's no plot behind it or anything. It's just a conversation. So it's, very good for familiarization and for just general knowing how people communicate. Movies and TV shows, not as good as books and vlogs and stuff. They're generally a bit more advanced because they have plots and stuff, but obviously it's quicker than a book. And so you want to kind of look for ones originally made in the language. So if you're learning French or something, you'd want it to be made in French, not dubbed. The reason you don't want it dubbed is because, one, it's going to throw you off looking at like their mouths and talking, and it's just kind of annoying as well. And like when they're dubbed, they're not really using Italian, like, or whatever language expressions and that kind of thing. They're just kind of having to translate what people in like English speaking countries would use as expressions into that language, which is different to what you'd understand if you saw it. But yeah, it's generally a bit annoying. But if you're more advanced, you can watch a show actually made in that language. That's fine. It's just kind of difficult. Something you can do, which I don't personally, but I have heard other people do it. Maybe I'm the odd one out. Is you can put foreign subtitles over just any normal English show. So you're just watching a normal show, but you've got subtitles up with writing in the language you're learning. So like French writing, Spanish writing, whatever. And you can read that while you're listening to what the characters are talking about. I personally find this irritating, but other people have said it works. So you can give it a go, find it if you like it. I guess the advantage would be you can read the subtitles while they're talking and kind of match the words up. And something that I have done is you can almost like see, because obviously you're reading the subtitles, you can see the last word and you can almost guess what they're going to say if you've never watched the show before and then they say it, which is kind of satisfying. But yeah, I personally find it irritating. Things to be careful with though, as far as content goes, I know books are great, but you do need to be careful with old books. And the reason for that is because if they're many decades or even centuries old, they will have different slang and expressions, so people might not necessarily talk like that. And obviously characters might be older in books, so they'll talk different. But if the book is written in older times, it's just going to be using different ways of phrasing things. Like, if you even read an English book from 100 years ago, you could just notice how they just talk differently. Just like narration and stuff, not even characters talking to each other. And sometimes it's actually so old that there's actually different language rules, like the rules of the language have changed, like spelling of words, which order words should go in, and that can really mess you up if you haven't learnt too much of it and you're reading something old, and that you're like learning different wrong rules, and that'll really confuse you because you'll see them do that, and you'll see someone else do this, and it will just mess with you. Like, I thought that was how you did it, and you're right, because that was how you did do it, but that was because you were reading an old book. So even with books that aren't that old, like, where is it? This one, for example, L'Isla di Arturo, I believe it's from the 1950s, so it's not even that old, but it still has some things that are a bit annoying. I luckily read it because it is quite a hard book, near the end of when I was learning Italian, and I could pick out all the things that had changed, which was interesting. But if I had have read potentially an easy old book, like an old nursery rhyme or fairy tales or something that was for younger kids, but it was old, it would have thrown me off. And then music as well, it can be really, really hard to understand. I actually still struggle with it in languages, like kind of like modern music. I struggle with it because it's very metaphorical and nonsensical. They swap words around to get them to rhyme. And yeah, it can throw you off. So I guess if you can understand music, it can't hurt you, but it can be really annoying. So just be careful with those two because they can actually teach you the wrong things. But definitely once you've learnt the language fully, you can try reading old books and that kind of stuff. The good thing is because they're both so hard, it's difficult to do them while you're a beginner and get the wrong idea, but it's possible, so just be careful. What you definitely don't need a teacher to just hold your hand and walk you through learning the language. So language learning is actually not really about learning the language, it's about becoming a better student. It's very intellectually personal, and what that means is when you're learning a language, you're almost teaching yourself to become better at this idea of learning a language. Like when you first learnt a language, I wouldn't say you were probably fluent in your native language until maybe 5, or whatever. Like it took you years and years to get good at that. And then your second language, it might take you a few years but less time. And then after that, depending on the language you do, it's going to get easier and quicker and that kind of thing. So you don't need a teacher to actually walk you through teaching you the language. What you should be doing, you can definitely seek help, but you should learn from a variety. You shouldn't learn from one master. So you can always hire like a FaceTime teacher online for an hour here and there to just talk to friends or help you with stuff. But you definitely want to focus on just teaching yourself because it's so personal how you learn that one teacher can't really replicate that. Obviously they could answer questions and stuff, but they can't teach you. And the second thing is natural talent. So you really don't need natural talent. The order for things you have, I guess, is natural talent alone is the worst. You won't learn a language with just natural talent. Hard work alone is very, very good, and if you're lucky, both. But forget natural talent. You don't need it. No one who speaks 5 languages is only naturally talented. Like, they obviously had to put in hard work as well. It didn't just come upon them. They spent years and years where you didn't see them learning all of them. And yeah, if they speak a lot, obviously they probably do have a bit of natural talent, but it's rubbish. Hard work pays off infinitely more. There's no one really who couldn't learn like literally 5 languages plus if they, even with no natural talent, just with trying hard. Obviously, if you're naturally talented, you're lucky, but just forget about that. It doesn't serve you if you don't have it. So there's no point thinking about it. And yeah, hard work will always overcome natural talent when natural talent does not work hard enough. That's definitely true. And in this case, natural talent alone won't even help you. So just focus on the hard work part. And then the bonus tip is the best thing you can have to learn a language is structure. So structure basically means the order of which you learn things in. So a lot of problems people have is like, when they start learning a language, they're like, okay, learn greetings, how to say hello, goodbye, and then they'll try and learn colours and numbers, and then they get stuck because they just don't know what to learn. They're just learning groups of words like colours, numbers, animals, jobs, all those things, and then they're screwed because it's their first real language they've learned other than their native language, which they did on accident basically. So they're kind of in a tough spot. Structure is basically it's just a list of things in the order you should learn them. So it starts with something and then it keeps going, and at the end of the list you've learned everything. You've learned every part of a language. Even if it's like 10 to 20 steps, that's covered everything. And then from there you just need to read into stuff and learn more words. So I'll definitely do a video on structure because of how important it is and the structure I use. But yeah, that's basically it. So those are the 3 things you definitely need to learn a language and the few things you don't need. I'll definitely put a video up on structure. That's super important. But yeah, thank you and have a good one.